In the Alec Baldwin case, it's very interesting. He is both the producer and the actor who fired the trigger and took this woman's life tragically. But he could be on the hook civilly as a producer, or potentially, I guess, I don't know if criminally he could be facing some liability as a producer. Everyone in this case seems to be pointing at the young armorer. Her name is Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She's like 24 years old. She's very young to be in charge of guns on a set, but she's done it before. And she's the daughter of like one of the best or the best known armorers in all of Hollywood. So she had good training, one presumes. To me, I see it so interesting. The assistant director who was supposed to make sure that gun didn't have real bullets in it admits he didn't check the chamber before he handed it to Alec Baldwin. He was the last line of defense. Well, Alec was, but he was second to last. They're all pointing at her. Now, yes, the armorer has responsibility for the gun, but they're all pointing at her, and she hasn't spoken yet. But her lawyer finally spoke. They went on the Today Show, and here's where her defense is going. Very interesting. Listen.
There was a box of dummy rounds, and the box is labeled dummy. Hannah did take from that box, which she, by all accounts, should have been able to rely on. That contains only dummy rounds. She loaded rounds from that box into the handgun, only later to find out and she had no idea. She inspected the rounds, that there was a live round. Now, we don't know, however, whether that live round came from that box. We're assuming it did. We're assuming somebody put the live round in that box, which if you think about that, the person who put the live round in the box of dummy rounds had to have the purpose of sabotaging this set. You have a round that's supposed to contain only dummy bullets, prop ammunition, that have a projectile but are incapable of being fired. And they resemble a real round.
Why
and the
would
reason
someone
for that,
do that?
Savannah, is that when you look down...
Why would someone do that,
Well,
and who in your mind
maybe
had the
wanna-
motive and the opportunity to do it?
I believe that somebody who would do that would want to sabotage the set, want to prove a point, want to say that they're disgruntled, they're unhappy. And we know that people had already walked off the set the day before. And they had been, and they're unhappy. And the reason they were unhappy is they're working 12 to 14-hour days. They were not given hotel rooms in and around the area, so they had to drive back and forth an hour to Albuquerque, and they're unhappy.
He used the S word. Your thoughts on that, Arthur?
Well, I drive back and forth an hour to work. I mean, that's the big complaint here. And the reaction. I mean, you talk about overreacting. You put a live bullet. I mean, that's what you do. That's not what you do. Maybe you give someone like rotten tuna fish in their sandwich as opposed to good tuna fish, or play some sort of practical joke. You don't put a live round in the middle of a film set where they're going to be firing weapons. I mean, that's absolutely inexcusable. I do know that the sheriff is doing a very thorough investigation. If they find out who put that live round in there, I mean, they should be charged. It's not the easiest charge, but they should be charged immediately.
Mm-hmm. What we learned, because she released a statement too, Jonna, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, which basically says she was dealing with a box of rounds that was labeled dummy rounds. Now, yes, it's her job to know the difference, right? There's a way of telling the difference between dummy rounds and live rounds. Right. But to her point, her lawyer's point, if somebody other than the armorer herself, right, if she was negligent, she put something in there, that's one thing. But if somebody actively put a live round in the box labeled dummies, this case looks a lot different.
Right. And that would be absolutely murder. But what's not flying with me is there's no way that the armorer inspected the bullets that she put into the firearm and did not notice that one or more of them was not a dummy round, that one or more of them was a live round. So the only way this gun really could be sabotaged, if you follow her theory, is if she loaded the dummies, inspected them like her lawyer said she did, loaded the dummies, put the gun down, somebody sneaks up, takes the dummy out, puts a live round in, and she's nowhere around it, and nobody rechecks the gun, which is also, as far as I'm concerned, negligent. But you can tell a dummy round just like you can tell a blank. You can tell by looking at the primer is going to be dented in. There's going to be no powder in there. They typically put something that makes noise. So if you inspected like you said you did, you would have known that a live round was among them. So when did the sabotage allegedly occur? That's going to be something that's probably going to be very difficult to prove, if provable at all.
So that's what's crazy. Apparently, the only way you tell a difference between a dummy round, which does nothing. There's dummy rounds which do nothing. They're just there to look good, to make the gun look like a real gun. There's blanks, which actually do fire and create smoke and are potentially dangerous. You have to be super careful. And then there's live rounds, which is a real bullet, projectile. And the way you tell the difference, I guess, between a dummy round and a live round is you shake it. And I think it jingles. The dummy rounds, if I'm not mistaken, I could have this backwards, but I think it's the dummy round jingles, and you hear a little jingle. And so either she heard a jingle on all 6 of the rounds and loaded them, and then somebody later messed with it, or she heard a jingle that wasn't really there and she loaded a live round, not realizing it. So it was either she was negligent or somebody else was intentionally sabotaging, as the lawyer claimed. And if they can prove sabotage, that takes this case. I mean, that kind of gives you an explanation of why the sheriff's taking his time.
But Megyn, if what you just said is accurate, and right before she puts that bullet into the gun and hands it to Alec, she does the shake test. Ostensibly, even if someone did put live rounds in that box, if she's shaking it, that's supposed to be the line of last defense. Oh, wait a minute, it's not making a noise. Let me put jingling. This one aside. It's not jingling. Let me put this one aside and let me use another one. So,
but let me challenge you on that. Let me challenge you on that. If I were her lawyer, I would say, okay, you have to understand, in no world, because they made a point in their statement saying something like this, but in no world would you ever be expecting live round. This is how their statement ends. No one could have anticipated or thought that someone would introduce live rounds into this set, into a box that was labeled dummy rounds. I realize ultimately she's the armorer. She's responsible. But to her point, like, it's never happened. Who the hell would put a live round in a dummy box?
Obviously, that's going to be their argument. And I mean, I've heard a couple of experts on saying, it doesn't matter. Like, when you take that cartridge and you put it into a weapon, as the armorer, you're getting paid, whether you're 24 or 54, you're getting paid to make sure that round is not a live round. And that didn't happen here.
And then the assistant director is supposed to be another line of defense to make sure and he admits he didn't look at all the rounds before handing the gun to Alec. And then Alec wasn't supposed to point it at an actual person, which he clearly did. So it's like there's plenty of responsibility to go around. I will say he should stop tweeting and making Instagram posts. He should stop posting stupid Halloween photos of himself. But he made 7 Instagram posts this week, sharing the comment from a costume designer who also worked on the movie, who said, "The story being spun of us being overworked and surrounded by unsafe, chaotic conditions is bullshit." She said, "No one was too tired to do their jobs, and the crew were offered hotels but turned them down because they didn't feel they were fancy enough." And he retweeted it saying, "Read this. Just be quiet, right? Just be quiet. You're not helping, right?" I mean, you guys would be saying, like, pipe down, Alec.